So there was a hate crime committed against a young woman at Arizona State University a little over a week ago, and the media is doing whatever they can to cover it up. Now, local media covered the story just a tidbit, but the mainstream media didn't even acknowledge that this happened until yesterday. But the incident that we're talking about right now took place on September 19th. Now, the reason they don't want this story getting out there because the victim of this hate crime happens to be a 19-year-old white girl. Now, if the shoe was on the other foot, or this story was the other way around, you would hear about it constantly. There would already be people rioting in the streets, burning down small businesses. But because the victim is a little white girl, and the attacker happens to be black, they don't want this story getting out there. Even the local media, when they covered this story, they did not show the victim. They did not name the victim. And when showing the attacker, they blurred her face or they made it really hard for you to see who she was. But here's the attacker right here, Casey Sloan. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is that the janitor? Is that the lunch lady? Is that just some crazy woman off the streets? No. This happens to be a 19-year-old student of Arizona State University as well. How she got into ASU? I don't know. Probably DEI. She probably had no business being there in the first place. But as she attended Arizona State University, she started to grow a hatred for a lot of her fellow students, and she decided to go after one of these students because she was a helpless little white girl that was an easy target. Now, these are basically her words, not mine. She went after this little white girl because she viewed her as an easy target, and she stabbed her right there in the classroom. And most of you all have no idea this even happened because the attacker is black and the victim is a white girl. Now, the media is trying to claim that this was just a random attack, but it wasn't a random attack at all. Now, don't get me wrong. There was no problem or pre-existing issue between the attacker and the victim. The attacker only knew the victim's first name, didn't know anything else about the victim. But she had planned on doing this. This was a planned attack. She planned on attacking a couple of other people, but decided not to because she thought that this little white girl was the prime target, easy prey. And this is really sick, sadistic, twisted stuff, but this is the world that we live in. We got crazy people committing crimes, and we don't hear about it. They don't tell us about it because of, the agendas that are at play. A lot of these universities, a lot of these colleges, they're all about these DEI programs. They're all about acting as if white people are all bad and people of color are all good and everyone's ist and everyone's a phobe, everyone's bad people. But here we have this story glaring out at us and they won't even talk about it. Now, the victim's name, I believe, is Mara Daffron. Sorry if I am mispronouncing that, but like I said, the news, the media won't even name this girl, so I don't know how to pronounce her name. I've gone through clip after clip after clip. None of them will name this woman, so I don't know how to pronounce her name. That's how bad this situation is. Now, luckily, she survived. She survived, so that's the good news. But the bad news is there's things like this happening all over the country that are being buried. Stories like this that are being buried, and they're being buried for a reason because the victims aren't the race that they want the victims to be. And the attackers, right, they're not the race that the media wants them to be. Like I was saying earlier, if this was a white girl that decided to target a black girl and stab her in the middle of class, you would never hear the freaking end of it. But because it's the other way around, they have buried this story, but people are talking about it. And I'm here to spread the word about it as well. But remember how I said that even the local media wasn't showing the victim's face or naming the victim? I want to go ahead and roll this clip from the local media from about a week ago so you all can hear a little bit more details about what actually happened here. And you can see that they're obviously trying to hide who the victim is here because they don't want They have a certain narrative and agenda that they're pushing, and this story goes all the way against their agenda and the narrative that they've crafted in this country. So let's go ahead and roll this clip, and then I'll be right back with more.
At 10, an attack at ASU. Tonight, we're learning how a stabbing unfolded on the West Valley campus that landed one student in the hospital and another behind bars. 12 News journalist Jonathan McCall just finished reading through new court documents that reveal some disturbing details. Jonathan, what'd you find out?
Hey, Mark, the details are chilling. These court records taking us inside the mind of a 19-year-old woman now accused of this heinous crime. She told investigators she was planning that attack for at least a day, and there were plans to attack 2 other people, but she chose her victim because she thought she would be the easiest target. Tonight, new court records are providing disturbing details into what investigators say was a random attack on the ASU West Valley campus Thursday morning.
Just agonizing screams of pain, and clearly you can tell that it was someone who was fearing for their life.
Investigators say a student stabbing another student inside of a classroom. Police say the victim running out for help. Documents show the victim suffering deep cuts to her tricep and left rib cage.
The victim was seriously injured and required surgery.
Police say as the victim was being led to surgery, she asked officers who was behind the attack and why she was targeted.
Attempted murder in the first degree, that's a Class 1 felony. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument, a Class 3 felony. Interfering with an educational institution, that's a Class 6 felony.
Casey Sloan, now accused of causing that chaotic scene, facing a judge.
This is analogous to a school shooting.
Prosecutors claim that Sloan came to class to hurt someone and had been planning the attack the night before. Prosecutors say she described what she was about to do in a letter to her family and that she struggled with self-worth issues. Prosecutors also claim that she considered attacking 2 people, including a veteran, but decided on her victim because, quote, she was an easier target, and that she knew the victim's first name, but nothing else. Prosecutors calling the attack unprovoked, saying Sloan likely suffers from mental health issues, but also calling her a danger.
The state is concerned that Ms. Sloan is an extreme danger to the community.
Sloan tonight being held at the Maricopa County Jail on a $250,000 cash-only bond. As for that victim, tonight we are told that she is still recovering from her injuries. Right now, 12 News is staying in contact to learn exactly the extent of those injuries and her condition tonight. Mark?
Jonathan, do we know if the suspect has a criminal history?
That's one of the things that we also did learn during that initial appearance. We learned that the 19-year-old does not have a criminal record previous to this incident. But again, their big concern was that this was an attack that was unprovoked, that did cause serious damage to that victim. Mark?
Wow. Could have been much worse.
Yeah.
Jonathan, thanks.
So do you see how the victim is like put on the back burner when they talk about this story? It's like we're not even hardly going to acknowledge the victim at all. We're not going to show you her. We're not going to name her. We're not really going to talk about that. But let's talk about the attacker. Let's talk about the fact that she had self-worth issues. Let's try to make you sympathetic towards this freaking beast that stabbed this little girl in the middle of a classroom. This person who probably had no business being in this school in the first place. Maybe she has self-worth issues because she's looking around understanding that she has no business being in college with the other people who are in college around her. Maybe she's looking around understanding that she's not cut out for this. You know, that DEI programs allowed her into this college, so she doesn't feel like, you know, she has a low sense of self-worth because she has no business being where she's at in the first place. Maybe that's a possibility. Or maybe because of how she looks, she's looking around at all of the hot college-age girls and she's getting angry. She's getting angry that the little 19-year-old white girl who she views as easy prey, you know, maybe she has a boyfriend, or maybe guys are paying attention to her and they're not paying attention to her. But that's where we're at, folks. And let this be a perfect example for you all that stories like this are happening. Stories like this are happening around America, but chances are you will never hear about it. Even I, someone who goes looking, I may never hear about it because they do a great job at covering up certain stories while boosting others, right? That's what the media does. They cover up certain stories, and then they boost other stories that fit right into their agenda and narrative. And it's really sad to see, because this is a story that we should all have heard about by now. You know, this kind of reminds me of that story that we talked about a while ago on this channel about that crazy woman who went and killed a little white toddler in the middle of a grocery store parking lot. They tried to cover up that story as well. In fact, the crazy woman who did that, they said that she wasn't fit to stand trial. So right now in this country, I think we're sending a message, right? We're sending a message that some people from certain races are above the law, or at the very least above criticism. In fact, there will be more people upset by what I said in this video than being upset at the fact that this crazy girl stabbed this other girl in the classroom, right? Because that's where we're at right now. We're too sensitive to have conversations about, or it's not even a conversation about race. It's just a conversation that involves multiple races of people. We're too sensitive to have those conversations, but people aren't too sensitive to stab their classmates. That's kind of where we're at in this country. It's like people are doing the most crazy, insensitive things in the world, right? But we have to all pretend as if we're too sensitive to talk about these problems. So the problems will never be solved because we're too sensitive to even have the conversation in the first place. And that's one of the main reasons why I started doing YouTube, is because I want to move away from this. And I understand I can't change the whole world. I understand that I can't change the whole country. But at the very least, when you're with me watching my videos, we're going to have some of those sensitive conversations that may offend people. And I don't set out to offend anyone, because I love everyone. I like everyone of every different background. I don't care who you are or what you look like. As long as you ain't out here doing crazy stuff, then hey, you're cool in my book. But at the same time, I'm going to call out these problems, even if it's something that people deem as offensive. I'm going to call out these problems when I need to. And we need to. Now, like I said earlier, if the victim was black and the attacker was white, we would have no need to call out this problem, because the mainstream media would talk about it day and night for weeks on end until they got some type of riot started in the street and people going crazy. But when something happens to a little white girl, you don't get that response. So you need people like me out here pointing out these issues that are going on and ringing the alarm, because no one else is going to do it. You could even look at the true crime community. They're not going to talk about this story. Most of them won't touch this story with a 10-foot pole, because they know it involves people of different races, and because of that, people are going to be sensitive when having these conversations. But I think that's ridiculous. If a white girl stabbed a black classmate for no reason and planned on doing it because she was hateful or crazy, I would call it out. I would say, hey, this is bad. This is disgusting. But for some reason, people feel the need to be protective of people who look like them sometimes. I don't feel that need at all. But like I said, if this was a story that was the other way around, we might not even be talking about it, because everyone else would be talking about it, right? But because the person who the hate crime was committed against is a little white girl, you're not going to hear much about this story at all. And that's why I feel the need to call this stuff out, because we are creating a very unhealthy environment in our country. And what we're doing is right now, we're starting to make people resent each other and not like each other, because people are noticing the difference in media coverage. They're noticing the agendas at play here. And it's really pitting people against each other when we should all be coming together, right? You don't have to defend a violent murderer psychopath just because they have the same skin color as you. You'll see me all day, every day, calling out white people or people of various races because of their heinous crimes. And I think we should be able to do that regardless of who these people look like. But for now, let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. This will not be the last that I talk about this story. I have another video planned about this in the future. But for now, let me know your thoughts. Hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. And as always, remember to remain opinionated.